So today we're going to work on cutting a plan from Rhino. This is very much the same as we did with our elevation view last class. We're doing virtually the same thing. The only thing that we are doing differently is we're adding a section cut. Instead of being in section view, it's going to be in plan view so we can look through the top of our building. So it's kind of a combination of the sections lecture that we did a couple lectures ago and the line drawing lecture that we did last class. So I have once again opened my, in this case I opened my elevation view. It doesn't really matter which file you open. It could be day, it could be night. My guess is that you're probably going to want one of the daytime views, but again, it's entirely up to you. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I do a file save as, because what I do today to create the plan view is going to destroy a lot of geometry and change materials, etc. So I want to make sure that it's a copy that I'm working on. So we'll go ahead and save this instead. Let's make it in the 228 folder here. And let me do a new folder here, Fall 2015. And I will call this Plan. All right, so that is now saved. And we're going to start looking at this. I'll start working in the perspective view here. And much like we did with the section, we need to establish a big ground plane that's going to cut through everything. So I'll start with the ground plane. It's just a rectangular surface, bigger than all of my objects, something like that. And then I need to make this at a particular height. So I'm going to use a corner temporarily here. Let me zoom in on this object here. All right, there's my corner. And I'm going to move this right to ground level. And typically speaking, a plan view is always at 4 feet above ground level. And we do the 4-foot mark because it's above kitchen cabinets, so we can see the counters and the sink and stuff like that. But it's below the lower or the upper cabinets in the kitchen, so we're not cutting through those. So that's approximately, generally cuts through all the windows, cuts through the doors, etc. So I'm going to go ahead and move this giant plane here vertically by 4 feet so that it cuts through my building at that ground floor. Right? If I didn't like the ground floor, I could move myself up. I probably should move myself up because in this particular building, the ground floor is smaller than the upper story. So let me go ahead and we'll move it up. And we'll do an upper floor here. Hold on a second. Let me figure out why this isn't snapping. Come on. I'll snap on the back here. So we now should be 4 feet above. Now I'm going to lower it a little bit because it's going to cut through the ceiling there. I have a split level here. So let me go vertically, and we'll go down by a foot or so. Oops, I meant negative. Negative. There we go. So that it's going to cut through my building approximately there. Now I'm going to go ahead and back out and move this so that it intersects all of the geometry like that. It was just easier to snap to the one corner as a way of making sure that I aligned correctly. So go ahead and zoom back in on this block. Zoom selected. There we go. And so if we look at this, we can see that I put a big plane in where I want to slice through my building. I'd like to see what it is that I'm going to cut through. So I'm going to use that Section Tools plugin that we used during the section class, essentially the same way that we used it in section, just facing down rather than facing to one side or the other. So I'm going to go to Section Tools, Create, or ST Create is the command. I'm going to select objects, which will be all except for that big plane. I don't need that, so I'll hold down Control and deselect the plane. I should probably select, well, the ocean doesn't really matter because I'm not cutting through it anyway. Okay, so I have all those objects selected. Let me look at my layers here. Oh, looks like I have some locked layers, so let me go ahead and unlock layers, which is probably why I didn't get everything selected. So let me go back and say all, and then we'll deselect just the big plane. and I'll go ahead and hit enter. And now it's going to ask me under direction. Now if I type direction, you see I have X and Y and pick. Okay? Right now I'm just going to leave it as X-axis. Notice I don't have Z-axis. What I have to do is I have to create this section in the right view, right, or the front view, which if I look at my little coordinates here, I have X and Y, right, and Z is going up. So I can do it this way. So we'll go ahead and leave it for right now in the Y-axis there. And we're going to choose to have solid mode as surfaces. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And it definitely didn't do what I was supposed to do. Let me start the stcreate command in the right view instead. So stcreate all except for that really large plane. I'll go ahead and hit enter. And let's leave the axis the same here. And there we go. Now I have it pointed down. I had to initiate the command in the right view or the front view or the back view to start this. Now it's pointing down, which is the way I want it to. And I'll snap to that large plane. Turn on center and see if I can snap right to the center of that large plane. Perfect. And so that's now pointing down, and it's created my section for me. So now we can go back into my perspective view. I'll press enter because I'm done, and it creates ST00 as the layer. And I'll go ahead and let me put this on its own layer. Plan. Change object layer. I can turn that off. And now I can once again go to Section Tools and say View and select sections. I'm going to click on the list to select my section. And I want to see the section in perspective. All right, and so now I can look down at my building here, and it's conveniently, oops, let me select it here, zoom selected, it's conveniently sliced right through, right, and is showing me the top of my building. There's the stairs going down, etc. Right? So it's essentially created a plan view for me. Okay? It was supposed to fill in all of the walls, but it had difficulty with some of the walls, so I'm going to have to do a little bit of work afterward on that fill-in, like I did last time. But I have a pretty nice plan view. So now I need to start setting this up in a viewport so that I can export it. So let me go ahead and jump into my top view, which is the closest to a plan view. Right? I want to include some of the topography here. So maybe something like that. And I'll go ahead and I'll save this view. So let me go ahead and go to Set View, Named Views, and we'll save this as Plan so that I can come back to it. And now we're looking down on the object. I can switch this into shaded mode so that I can have a look at what it looks like from the top. If I type stcreate or stview or go to Section Tools View, I can turn ST00 on for this top view. And I must have typed, it's called Plan, sorry. STView. Sorry, I typed in the wrong name here, and it should have been Plan. And there we go. Now I can see down into my building. I've removed the roof, and I can ultimately do a clay rendering, which we'll do in a second. Okay? Now, the problem here is that I can move forward with the line drawing without a problem, because Make2D recognizes the stcreate, and so the Make2D will work exactly the same in this view that it did in the elevation view. So if I'm going to do that, remember I had to show the camera so that I could draw the viewport rectangle. So we're going to continue on, and this is again just repetition of what we did last time. It's the same concept, just a different view. I'm going to go to Set Camera, Show Camera. It won't show up in this view, but it will show up in my perspective view, which is right there. And so we can see the camera pointing up toward the sky. And I will use my rectangle here. It may be helpful to see this in wireframe for a second. There's that point. And we'll do a rectangle, making sure point snap is enabled, and we'll snap I hope to that point. Let me turn off center and see if that'll help us here. That point to that point, and then I'm going to scale this rectangle. Scale by 2 from this point. And if we go back to the top or the plan view, we should just barely see the yellow around the border, which is exactly what we want. So we've gotten this to the point where we're basically ready to do the Make 2D. Right? So we're looking down on the drawing. I'll go ahead and type Make 2D. And once again, we have some options. I do want to include the hidden line view, because I think that'll be useful. I'm not going to include the tangent lines. And I can choose to maintain the source layers or not. Last time we didn't maintain source layers, and we got just 2 layers when we moved into Illustrator, the visible lines and the hidden lines. This time I'm going to choose to maintain the source layers just to show you what happens when we go into Illustrator. Okay, we get a slightly different setup here. So I went ahead and I checked that box. It's going to be for the current view, and I'll say OK. Oops, I had to select everything, sorry. Make 2D, all, maintain source layers, and we'll go ahead and say OK. And we'll let it work. While we're waiting for this, I will point out there is a step-by-step, just like last time. If you go to Tutorials, Assemblies, and it's 10.7, Plans from Rhino, and this will walk through exactly everything that I'm doing and how I'm doing it. All right, so it was able to finish. I'm going to switch out of the plan view, and I want to see the top view somewhere. So let me go to Set View, Top, so we can see the whole top view. And let me go into wireframe mode. And somewhere in here, I should have my Make 2D. So I don't know. Here's my Make 2D, which was turned off. There it is. And as I zoom in, right, there's my rectangle. Notice that I'm missing the contour lines in the upper half because I sectioned through. Right, so that's probably something I need to go back and grab those contours because they're being seen. But I can go ahead and trim around my rectangles because I don't need all of that anymore. So let me go ahead and I'll use this as a trim. So let me go ahead and type trim. We'll get rid of all this extra stuff. There we go. And I can actually take it as far as deleting the rest of these pieces as well. Get rid of this. All right. So now I'm back to just this piece, which is what I'm ultimately going to export. Now I said that I was missing the extra contours, so let me go back to the plan view, and it looks like I zoomed a little bit, so let me go to set view plan, and I'm going to clear all views, and I'm going to make 2D again, and I'm going to select the objects to draw. Let me select, if it'll let me, I'm going to select the rectangle. I'll have to select it by layer here. There's my rectangle. That's selected. And I want all of those contours that I created. And it seems to me I put those on their own layer somewhere last time. Well, I can go ahead and select them manually here. All right, so that should be them. And I'll go ahead and do another make 2D. Same thing here. It's the current view. All the settings are the same. I'll go ahead and say OK. This one shouldn't take very long. And we can jump back to that top view. And we can see that it made another set of lines here. Let's go ahead and move that set. And I'm going to line up those rectangles again. Like that, and you see that now I have the other part of this. I can get rid of the extra border, and then I can trim once again. So I just got those lines back because I didn't include them in the first one. So let me trim, and we'll get rid of these. Oops. Trim. There's our cutting object. Let's get rid of this. Let's get rid of this. Looks like I need this line to trim. There we go. Okay, so I'm back here where I have the whole piece. I'm going to go ahead and move this to 0.000, and then we'll zoom selected. There it is. Again, it's overlapping everything else. It's overlapping the elevation view that I exported last time. And I'll go to File, Export, Selected, and it's once again going to be an Adobe Illustrator file. And let's put it in the 228 folder. And I'll call this Plan, for lack of something better. And under Options, again, I'm going to do 48 to 1. And I'll go ahead and say OK. And I'll click on Save. And then OK. So that then exported the plan view. Exactly the same thing we did as we did with the elevation view, except we did the section before we created it. So now if I jump back into my perspective view here, right, and we start to look at this, if I'm going to do a rendering, remember V-Ray doesn't recognize the section tools, which is very unfortunate. So I'm going to have to go back through the steps that we did with the section, where I used that big plane and I split my objects, and then I converted some of them to that see-through material to do the rendering. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. So let me go ahead and turn on that big plane. And let's go ahead and view this in shaded mode so that we can kind of see it. I can also hide the camera because that's not going to matter anymore. So let me go back to Plan View, Set Camera, and we'll turn off the camera. And it may be helpful to view this in one of the side views. So let me go to Set View. Let's look at it in the left view there. That'll work. Okay, so now this object is a block instance, and in order to split the block instance, I have to explode it. So a lot of times it's useful to make sure that we have the block instance selected here, or select all there, and type explode, right, which will take the block instance and make it actual objects and curves, etc. So now I'm going to go ahead and use this as my split. So I'm going to type split, select objects to split. It's going to be everything there except for that plane. I'll hit enter, and then I'll use the plane as the cutting objects, and we'll go ahead and let it go. It looks like I got a few split faileds, so we'll have to figure out which objects are the failed splits. It could just be the curves that were selected in that. All right. So now that the split's done, I should be able to select everything on the top half here, like that. Okay, it looks like these windows, yeah, those are block instances. Those should have been exploded as well. Right, so let me try that explode one more time. There we go. And let's try the split one more time. Again, the object plus the plane. Still a few split faileds. But again, those might be just the curves. Probably should have saved before I did the split. All right, so it did come, but I'm going to go ahead and save right now. Always a good idea. All right, so now let's try this again. I'm going to select everything up above here, and good, I have a nice clean break. Everything above that floor plan plane needs to turn into the see-through material. So I'll go to my materials, and I'll check to see if I have see-through loaded, which I don't. Let me go ahead and load the material. And we'll go into V-Ray materials, and we'll load that see-through material. It's under special materials, see-through. Go ahead and open that. Perfect. Now, I want to apply it to all the objects. However, in this scene here, some of these are windows. And if I want the shadows to accurately be cast inside my building, I want to make sure that the glass is turned off and is actually transparent. So let me go ahead and go here to the glass, right? And I'm going to have to look for anything with glass in it. So we'll look at the glass railing should go off. The window glass should go off. There, that should be all of it as I'm looking at it. Looks pretty good. Okay, so those are now turned off. Here, I can go ahead and apply that see-through material. So I'll right-click and say Apply Material to Selection. And so they now all have their glass applied. I can go back, and I can either leave the glass off or I can turn it back on. Now, for the plan view, I'm probably not going to need the glass. I can probably just leave it open, and it'll look fine. It's kind of a matter of preference as to whether you want to go through the process of reselecting the glass. To do that, I'll select nothing, and then right-click on each of these layers and say Select Object, or turn them on and select the objects. select objects, select objects. And because of the block, I ended up with 2 copies of these. I don't think it's going to matter, but I'm going to make sure that I select them all. And glass railing. Go ahead and select objects. Okay, so that's all the glass. But again, any of the glass that's below my building here, I don't want. So we'll deselect all of that. Right? And now we're just to that upper glass. And I want that to show up as being entirely transparent. So I'll go to Materials, and I'll create a completely transparent material. Let me just go to Create Material, Standard, and I'll call this Transparent. Say OK. And I'll change the transparency. It's the only thing I'm going to change to white, which means it's 100% transparent. And so I'll go ahead and I'll apply that transparent material to the selection. So I'll apply material to selection. Okay, so now all of the roof and everything is that see-through material. It'll block the light. The glass that's above is transparent, so that's going to shine through without a problem. I'm going to switch here and go back to my plan view, and we'll go to Set View, Plan. So again, I'm set up in that particular view. And now it's a matter of doing the settings for the V-Ray clay rendering as we did before. Since I used the file that I used for my elevation, the settings should all already be in place. But just as a review, it was going to the V-Ray options and loading the clay rendering VisOpt settings. I also went through and adjusted my camera so that the physical camera is on and the shutter speed was 20. I may have to readjust this after I do this rendering. I put a directional light into the scene so that I could see the directional light. Let me go ahead and turn off that big plane so that that's gone. And let me quickly view my section here. So I'll go to Section Tools, View, and we're going to view ST00 in the plan view so we can kind of get a sense for what it is. I did have a bit of a problem. Let me switch into the perspective view over here with not all of the walls being filled in correctly. So let's ST view section 00 in the perspective. And then with ST00 active here, I'm going to fill in. See how those walls are vacant right now? I'm going to go ahead and fill those in really quickly. So bear with me for a second while I do that. By doing this now, I'm going to end up with a better clay rendering. So it's worth the extra time to go ahead and do this. Looks like I have a couple little tapered pieces, so I'll use the surface from 3 or 4 corner points to do these. A couple more here. Okay, so I have all of that selected. That material I want to be like a solid white or something. It has a default material applied to it right now on this layer, so I'm happy with it. It should turn out okay. So we'll go ahead and go back into my plan view. I now have those caps on the wall. and we'll go ahead and do a render and see how it turns out. All right, so that's done now. I'll go ahead and save the view. Put it in space 228. Call this clay. It looks to me like maybe it clipped the bottom. I should have a little bit more detail. Let me try one thing. Let me ST clear all views before I do this render just in case. And let me render that one more time. Okay, so it looks the same, so I guess it was okay. So now I have that done as the clay render. I'm going to go ahead and jump over into my Illustrator file. So we'll open up Adobe Illustrator. And I'll go to File and then Open to open the line drawing, which is right here under Plan. There it is. We have a similar problem as last time, so let me do Control minus. The line drawing is significantly larger than the artboard, so I'm going to go ahead and adjust the artboard to match the line drawing. So we'll pop that up here, that to there, move that to there, and move that to there. Now I can press Control 0 to see the whole drawing. And so I have all of my contours and I have my building. Now, remember, this time I elected to keep the source layers. And so if I look at my layers palette here, I have a bunch of layers that are individually controllable. And so as you get more advanced in this, it may be helpful to use it this way instead of the just what's hidden and what's visible, because I can actually go through and I can see a variety of things. So for example, here I have visible lines, exterior walls, hidden lines, exterior walls. Right? I can take my exterior walls that are on the layer, I can select all of those objects. Right? Looks like it just selected a little bit there. Let's see here. Exterior concrete wall, let's try that one. There we go. That selected much more. Let me change the color so you can see this a little bit better. Hold on. There we go. So you can see I selected all the exterior concrete walls, right? Those are visible. Visible here. Let me select those. There we go. So I've got those exterior visible concrete walls, and then I can adjust their weight independently. So maybe those become 2-point lines and are a little bit thicker than some of the others. So the point is that I have a lot more flexibility now with how I'm choosing which lines. And so if I were doing this and setting this up, I would make 2 layers that identify hidden or visible. So we'll start with visible. And then I would go through my layer stacks here and select everything that says visible. It's entirely possible. Okay, and I'll then drag these. Thank you so much for not letting me do it. Let's try that one more time. All right, I'm going to drag these onto that visible layer, which is going to make them a sub-layer of visible. It lets me organize a little bit better. So let me go ahead and continue and select more of the visible. Hopefully this time I won't miss one. All right, and let's put those again on the visible layer. There we go, which lets me control the visible layer separately. I'll do another layer here, and we'll call this hidden. And I'll throw the hidden objects onto the hidden layer. There we go. That was the visible one that I missed. Stick it on the visible layer. All right, so now I have a hidden and I have a visible layer. It's always helpful to have them like this so that we can minimize the layer stack. But we can also select, for example, all of the hidden layers, right? Even though they're named separately, because it's inside, I can select all of them, and then we can adjust those properties. So we'll take all of the hidden layers, we'll make them at 0.5 point lines, we'll make them dashed, and we'll do a 4 point with a 2 point gap, which is the same as what I did last time. And then we'll make all of those lines a kind of a dark grayish color, something like that. And now when we select off, we can see all of those hidden lines. Right, nicely selected. We can also select all of the visible lines and do some basic properties with the visible lines. So let me come over here. We'll assign them a basic weight of 1.5 points. And we'll assign a color for all of them as being black. Oops, it didn't stick as black. Come on now. Now it's being a little challenging right now. Oh, they selected as black. Okay, good. So now all of those are black. So you can see I'm quickly kind of working through. Some of these hidden lines obviously probably need to go away. These ones don't exist. They shouldn't be there. We'll get rid of those like that. This line here shouldn't be here either. So we'll get rid of that because that's part of the contour. Some of these should be, some of these shouldn't be, right? I'm guessing that that probably needed to go away. We'll leave that one. We can look at it. Now here's a good example of where dividing it into different layers can be helpful, right? So I have these layers that represent my window in here. And so if I look over here at my visible layers, we should be able to find some of my window. Right, there's some of the window. You hold down Shift. There's more of the window, more of the window. Right, so those appear to be the bulk of my windows. Let's change those line weights independently to maybe 0.25 point, very thin lines instead of the very thick lines. And so I was able to get a lot more definition out of those lines. It's not so black anymore. This and this probably need to be thick like the walls, though, so we can find out what layer those are on. Looks like it's this layer. Let's select all of those objects. And we'll bump up the weight of those to match the walls. And maybe this one, maybe I need to bump them up a little bit more. But you get the idea of how I can now, because they're on separate layers, I have a little bit more control over what the lines look like and how thick they are, as opposed to doing them all at once. So it's a little bit more work, it's a little bit finer control. Likewise for the topo lines, right? I can select all of the topography lines like that and very quickly adjust them. Right? We'll make them at maybe 0.75 point, and we'll make a dashed line. Let's do like a 12 point, a 2 point, and then a 4 point. I'm just doing this so that you can see it, and then we'll repeat to a 2 point gap. And we'll make the color a lightish gray. And now you can see that I missed one, but you get the idea. They're a different style hidden line. figure out why I missed this. Looks like there's two lines on top of each other. Well, anyway, I can come back and fix that one in a second. You guys don't have to watch me do it. Okay, so now I have this in place. Now it's a matter of going ahead and placing in the background clay render. So I'll go to File and then Place, and I'll pick my clay render. It's right here. I'm going to press Control minus so I can see a little bit more of it, and I'm going to adjust the size of it to match up with my document here. That. And I also want to make sure that it is on its own layer that is below all of the other layers. So let me go a new layer. We'll pull this layer down below everything else. And I'm going to move that so that it's on its own layer so that we're looking down on it. Let me go ahead and make sure it lines up. Looks like I made it too wide. So it may take a little bit of finesse on my part to get it to line up correctly. But the point is that you get the idea of how I would go about this. Yeah, somehow this turned out bigger than it was supposed to. I can also lock these two layers so I can't accidentally select them. Anyway, I'm going to have to play around with that a little bit more, but you get how that then can add a little bit of subtle shadow to the background of the plan. Okay? So that's the process of going through and doing the plan. It's, again, very, very similar to what I did with the elevation, except that we added the section cut so that we could actually see the plan itself rather than the top or roof of the building. Okay? So again, with regards to what you're posting today, it'd be great if you got to a plan, but if you're still working on modeling or you're working on rendering or whatever it is you're working on, make sure you do make a post for exercise 228, whatever it is. Okay, so whatever you're working on, you'll get credit. Just make sure that I get a post for it. Are there any questions about this? No? We'll take this a step further and we'll do section cuts next time. So we get this yet again and we'll do the line drawings yet again. All right?